An update. Cop convicted of killing a black man at a gas station. I'm going to go to the video and bring you the update. Here it is.
All right, Pete, do me a favor, go and step out.
Do this?
Step out for me, please.
No, I don't really want to get out.
Okay, I'm not asking you right now. Step out for me.
Why?
No.
Can I know why?
Because you're not coming back on file, man.
Hey, step out of the car. Can I know why?
Because you're not coming back on file for me.
What does that mean?
Step out. You're not coming back on.
You can't figure out who you are.
Listen.
What do you mean you can't figure out who I am?
Because it's not coming back on file. You better come out now, dude.
Take my phone.
Hey.
Okay.
You gonna cooperate or what?
I'm gonna cooperate.
Okay. Put your stuff down. Get out.
Can you stop holding me? You stop touching me.
I don't want you reaching for anything, man.
I'm not reaching for anything.
Okay, step out.
Okay. I'm not reaching for anything.
Turn around.
I'm not reaching for anything.
Dude, stop. Turn around. Turn around. Hey, 5-9-10-3. Stay in the car.
Put it up full mass. In an update. In New Mexico. Las Cruces Police Department, police officer Brad Lunsford. A former police officer was found guilty Wednesday of voluntary manslaughter in the fatal shooting of Mr. Presley Eze. Lunsford had pleaded not guilty. His attorney said he will ask the judge to review the verdict for its legal sufficiency. Quote, while I respect the jury's verdict, I am extremely disappointed in it. I didn't believe the state met its burden, he said in an email to the Associated Press. So prosecutors said he shot Mr. Presley at point blank range in a scuffle after police responded to a 911 call from a gas station attendant who reported that the young man stole a beer. Presley allegedly placed his hand on a second officer's stun gun before being shot. The Attorney General, Raul Torres, said the use of deadly force was not reasonable, noting that Lunsford immediately drew his service weapon and shot Mr. Presley in the back of the head. Quote, today's verdict reaffirms a fundamental principle. No one is above the law, not even those sworn to uphold it. Officer Lunsford's actions were not just a tragic lapse in judgment. They were an egregious abuse of power that cost Presley Eze his life. Torres said in a statement, that's the AG, after the verdict was announced. The charge of voluntary manslaughter with the firearms enhancement carries a possible sentence of up to 9 years in prison. Evidence at trial included police body cam footage of the confrontation, with police pulling Mr. Presley Eze from his vehicle, and the struggle ensued. Let's go to Philip Stinson. He's a professor of criminal justice at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and said most fatal shootings of on-duty officers are determined to be legally justified under precedent stemming from two 1980s era U.S. Supreme Court rulings. Quote, it is incredibly difficult for a prosecutor to obtain a conviction in a jury trial in one of these cases, and that's because jurors are very reluctant to second guess the split second, often life or death decisions of an on-duty police officer in a potentially dangerous street encounter. Anything can happen, but it's only in the most egregious cases. So records compiled by Stinson, university colleagues, and students through the Police Integrity Research Group show that 205 non-federal law enforcement officers have been arrested on criminal charges of homicide or manslaughter over the past 20 years, resulting in 66 convictions, 27 convictions of them for manslaughter, homicide. Quote, if you do get a conviction, is often for the lesser offense, Stinson said, and that is correct. We're not talking about a statutory dynamic, state law, federal law. You're talking about case law contextualized through decades-old Supreme Court cases. Now, if this attorney gets what he wants, I'm talking about the defense attorney. If he gets a judge, that judge should look at the verdict for legal sufficiency. And somehow this judge comes to the conclusion that the verdict is not legally sufficient. Here's the problem with that ruling, that potential ruling. If the verdict is not legally sufficient, that would have meant the charge is not legally sufficient. In other words, it should have been kicked out on a pretrial motion rather than have a verdict overturned. Don't allow them to frame this in a different way. Once it was approved, meaning the charges were allowable, the indictment will stand, the person will go to trial, a jury will hear it. And then once, based on the rules of their game, their justice system, a verdict comes, and that verdict happens to be contrary to what may have happened in a previous time. All of a sudden, they want to change the rules, not before the game, not during the game, but after you won the game. That's a hell of a thing, isn't it? Many of us have never heard of a judge looking at a verdict for legal sufficiency. Why? Because it's rarely ever used. We accept the verdict because we accept that the charge was credible, was right, was appropriate and constitutional. Jackson, it's a hell of a thing this defense attorney is proposing. And for this defense attorney to be proposing to file a motion to that same judge to declare legal sufficiency is telling me that somebody has told him to do so.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, and just back to that video, you watch this whole situation and what you're actually dealing with. And from the get-go, this police officer was ready to hurt this man. He had his grabbing his arm for no good reason. And we have to stay on top of stuff like this. This reminds me kind of like here in Missouri, if with these ballot measures, we pass a higher minimum wage to protect abortion laws. And then the state of Missouri, despite the fact in the very, very conservative red state of Missouri, despite the fact that people came out and voted for that, they're like, nah, we're going to try to stall it. We're going to try to bring it back. So you got to stay on top of stuff like this because people in power ultimately, they follow the law, but they break it too if they can. So, it's and that's really just how we operate. At the end of the day, people do what we can. So that's why you got to stay on it. But that really blew my mind when I saw them doing that here in Missouri. Like, oh, so the people came out and said we want a higher minimum wage, and y'all like, nah. So that's all this judge is doing too.
Yep, that's right. That's right. All right, we'll bring updates as they come.